Imagine waking up on a ship, surrounded by dead bodies, only to realize one of those bodies is yours. That's not just horror. That's pure psychological nightmare. Today, we're diving deep into Triangle, one of the most mind-bending psychological thriller movies ever made. And trust me, this isn't just another horror film with jump scares. This is a terrifying puzzle where every single detail matters. If you've ever searched for Triangle 2009 Explained, Triangle Full Story, or a full movie breakdown, then you're in the right place. Because by the end of this movie explanation in English, your brain might actually hurt. But in the best way possible. The film begins with a woman named Jess. She looks exhausted, broken, like someone carrying invisible pain on her shoulders. Early in the morning, she prepares her autistic son for the day, but something already feels wrong. The atmosphere is uncomfortable. The silence feels heavy. And then we notice strange little details. A seagull crashes into the window. Jess zones out randomly. She keeps repeating herself without realizing it. At first, it seems normal. Maybe she's just stressed. Maybe life is hard. But here's the twist. Those tiny moments are actually clues. Massive clues. Soon, Jess heads to the harbor where her friend Greg invites her on a yacht trip with a few others. Victor, Sally, Downey, and Heather. Everyone seems relaxed. Normal. Laughing. But Jess? She feels disconnected from reality. And this is where things get interesting. While sailing into the ocean, Jess suddenly says something chilling. I feel like I've been here before. At first, nobody cares. But you should. Because that single line is the key to the entire movie. Then suddenly, the wind dies completely. The ocean becomes silent. No waves. No sound. Just stillness. And honestly, that silence feels more terrifying than any monster. The group becomes nervous. Something feels deeply unnatural. Greg tries to joke around, but fear slowly spreads across everyone's faces. Then without warning, a massive storm appears out of nowhere. Not a normal storm. A violent, chaotic nightmare. Huge waves smash the yacht. People scream. The boat flips upside down in seconds. Everything becomes panic and darkness. And when the survivors finally climb onto the overturned yacht, Heather is gone. Vanished. No body. Nothing. But what happens next will shock you. Out in the distance, they see something impossible. A gigantic abandoned ocean liner slowly approaching through the fog. Silent. Almost ghost-like. Its name? Ilus. And the strangest part? When Jess looks at the ship, she recognizes it, even though she swears she's never seen it before. The group has no choice. Their yacht is destroyed. The storm is getting worse. So they climb aboard the mysterious ship. But the second they step onto the deck, something feels horribly wrong. The ship is completely empty. No crew. No passengers. No sound. Only echoes. And fresh bloodstains. Jess suddenly freezes. Because somewhere inside this endless floating maze, someone is watching them. And this is only the beginning. The moment the group steps inside the massive ship, the atmosphere changes completely. It no longer feels like reality. It feels like a trap. The giant hallways of the Aeolus are silent, almost frozen in time. The lights flicker softly above them, and every footstep echoes through the empty corridors like the ship itself is alive. At first, everyone thinks help might still be somewhere on board. Maybe the passengers escaped. Maybe the crew abandoned the ship during the storm. But Jess? She looks terrified. Not confused. Terrified. And this is where the Triangle Full Story starts becoming truly disturbing. As they explore the ship, strange details begin appearing everywhere. Half-finished meals. Freshly lit cigarettes. Keys left behind. Everything suggests someone was just here. but nobody is around. Then suddenly, Jess notices something horrifying. A keychain, lying on the floor. She picks it up slowly, and her face turns pale. Because she's seen it before. Not once. Many times. But how? The audience starts asking the same question. Is she hallucinating? Did she actually visit this ship before? Or is something far more terrifying happening? Meanwhile, the others begin getting frustrated. Victor wants to search for a radio. Greg tries calming everyone down. Sally stays close to Downey because fear is spreading fast. And then comes one of the creepiest moments in the entire movie explanation in English. They hear footsteps above them. Slow, heavy. Someone is definitely on the ship. The group immediately runs upstairs, hoping to find survivors. They discover fresh blood leading down a hallway. Now panic truly begins. Greg shouts for whoever's there, but no one answers, only silence. Cold, endless silence. Then Jess notices something written on a mirror. Go to the theater. Not help. Not danger. Just a command. Almost like someone specifically left a message for them. But here's the twist. Jess already knows where the theater is. Without hesitation. Without thinking. She leads the group directly there as if she memorized the layout long ago. The others notice it too. How do you know where you're going? Gregus. Jess can't answer. Because she doesn't know herself. And this is where things get interesting. Inside the theater, they find something impossible. Photos. Hundreds of them. Pictures of the group boarding the yacht earlier that day. Every single person. Every movement. Every moment. Someone had been watching them before they even arrived. Fear instantly turns into terror. Victor starts accusing someone on the ship of playing sick games. Downey thinks maybe there's a killer hiding nearby. But Jess notices something even worse that in one photo. She sees herself, standing alone, looking directly at the camera. And the expression on her face isn't fear. It's guilt. At this point, the movie becomes a psychological maze. The audience realizes this isn't just a survival story anymore. Something deeply unnatural is happening. Then suddenly, bang! A loud gunshot echoes through the ship. Everyone freezes. Another shot, screams erupt. Victor gets hit. Chaos explodes instantly. The group runs for cover while an unknown masked shooter begins hunting them through the corridors. But what happens next will shock you. During the panic, Jess catches a quick glimpse of the killer from far away. And for one split second, the killer moves exactly like her. Same posture, same body shape, every single one. That's what makes the loop so cruel. The masked Jess slowly walks through the corridors while hearing her friends' voices echo through the ship. Her breathing becomes heavier with every step. At first, she hesitates. She doesn't want to hurt them. But then she remembers her son. Freedom. And suddenly the shotgun feels lighter in her hands. Meanwhile, the newest version of the group explores the ship exactly like before, completely unaware that Jess herself is now stalking them. The tension becomes unbearable because the audience already knows what's coming. Victor gets separated first. Just like every loop, Jess watches him from a distance through the shadows. He's scared, confused, calling for the others. Boom. The shotgun fires. Victor collapses instantly. The sound echoes across the ship like thunder. Jess freezes afterward, horrified by what she's done. But what happens next will shock you. Instead of stopping the cycle, the murder pushes events forward exactly the way they always happen. Nothing changes. At all. That's when Jess realizes the nightmare truth. The loop doesn't punish resistance. The loop requires it. Every violent action she takes is already part of the cycle. She isn't escaping fate. She's fulfilling it. And this is where things get interesting. The more Jess tries controlling the loop, the deeper trapped she becomes inside it. The remaining survivors begin panicking after hearing the gunshot. Downey screams that there's a killer on board while Sally desperately searches for Greg. Everything unfolds exactly like before. Jess follows them silently through the ship like a ghost haunting her own friends. But emotionally, she's falling apart. Because every scream hurts her. Every death destroys another piece of her soul. Yet she keeps going. Because she still believes there's a reward waiting at the end. The promise of returning home. That false hope keeps her moving. Then comes one of the smartest moments in the entire full movie breakdown. Jess encounters another version of herself hiding in the corridor. A terrified, new Jess, who has only recently discovered the loop. The two versions stare at each other in complete shock. One innocent, one broken, one still human, one already transformed by the nightmare. And for a second, it almost feels like Jess is staring directly at her own lost humanity. The newer Jess begs for answers. What's happening? But masked Jess says nothing, because she already knows the truth wouldn't help. The truth only creates another monster. Then suddenly, Downey appears unexpectedly. He sees both Jess versions. His mind completely breaks. Before anyone can react, he runs in panic, straight into danger. Moments later, he falls to his death. Another unavoidable tragedy. Another death added to the endless cycle. Jess begins realizing something horrifying. The more she interferes, the worse things become. But the nightmare still isn't finished. Greg and Sally eventually corner-masked Jess on the upper deck during a violent storm. Rain crashes around them while lightning flashes across the sky. Sally screams in anger. "Who are you?" Jess almost removes the mask, almost tells them everything. But then she remembers the note. Kill them all and return home. And once again, hope poisons her mind. A brutal struggle begins. The shotgun fires wildly. People scream. And during the chaos, Greg is fatally wounded. Jess tries helping him as he dies in her arms, but he looks at her with fear instead of trust. That moment destroys her emotionally, because now she understands something painful. Even if she escapes, she can never undo what she's become. And then, something impossible happens. The cycle suddenly resets again. The ocean calms. The yacht reappears. Another version of her friends sails toward the ship. Another version of Jess smiles innocently on deck. The nightmare starts over once more. But this time, Jess decides she's done following the rules. And that decision changes everything. Jess stares at the approaching yacht with hollow eyes. By now, she's seen this moment countless times. The same ocean, the same people, the same fake calm before horror begins. But something inside her has finally snapped. She no longer wants to survive the loop. She wants to destroy it. And this is where Triangle becomes emotionally terrifying, because Jess slowly realizes the true enemy may not be the ship. It may be herself. The newest version of the group boards the Aeolus again, confused and frightened exactly like before. Jess secretly watches from above while memories from previous loops flood her mind all at once. Thousands of deaths, thousands of screams, thousands of failures. At this point, time itself feels broken. Past, present, and future all blur together. Jess can barely tell which version of herself she even is anymore. But here's the twist. For the first time, she notices something different. A door, previously locked, now slightly open. And this is where things get interesting. Jess enters the mysterious room carefully and discovers something horrifying inside. A giant wall covered in handwritten messages from previous versions of herself. Save your son. Kill them faster. Don't trust the others. None of this is real. The walls are filled with madness. Proof that countless Jess versions already tried escaping long before her. Some became violent. Some became hopeless. Some completely lost their sanity. And suddenly Jess realizes something devastating. She isn't special. She's just another failed attempt. That realization crushes her emotionally, because the one thing keeping her alive, hope, begins disappearing. Then she notices one final message written larger than all the others. You must return. Return where? Reality? The movie refuses to answer immediately, making the mystery even more disturbing. Meanwhile, the new group begins repeating the familiar chain of events again. Victor gets nervous. Downey panics. Sally argues with Greg. Jess rushes through the corridors, desperately trying to stop things before the violence starts. This time she tries a completely different approach. Instead of hiding, she reveals herself. Jess suddenly appears before the group and begs them to listen. At first, everyone thinks she's insane. Every single one. That's what makes the loop so cruel. The masked Jess slowly walks through the corridors while hearing her friends' voices echo through the ship. Her breathing becomes heavier with every step. At first, she hesitates. She doesn't want to hurt them. But then she remembers her son. Freedom. And suddenly the shotgun feels lighter in her hands. Meanwhile, the newest version of the group explores the ship exactly like before, completely unaware that Jess herself is now stalking them. The tension becomes unbearable because the audience already knows what's coming. Victor gets separated first. Just like every loop, Jess watches him from a distance through the shadows. He's scared, confused, calling for the others. But boom, the shotgun fires. Victor collapses instantly. The sound echoes across the ship like thunder. Jess freezes afterward, horrified by what she's done. But what happens next will shock you. Instead of stopping the cycle, the murder pushes events forward exactly the way they always happen. Nothing changes. At all. That's when Jess realizes the nightmare truth. The loop doesn't punish resistance. The loop requires it. Every violent action she takes is already part of the cycle. She isn't escaping fate. She's fulfilling it. And this is where things get interesting. The more Jess tries controlling the loop, the deeper trapped she becomes inside it. The remaining survivors begin panicking after hearing the gunshot. Downey screams that there's a killer on board while Sally desperately searches for Greg. Everything unfolds exactly like before. Jess follows them silently through the ship like a ghost haunting her own friends. But emotionally, she's falling apart. Because every scream hurts her. Every death destroys another piece of her soul. Yet she keeps going. But because she still believes there's a reward waiting at the end. The promise of returning home. That false hope keeps her moving. Then comes one of the smartest moments in the entire full movie breakdown. Jess encounters another version of herself hiding in the corridor. A terrified, new Jess, who has only recently discovered the loop. The two versions stare at each other in complete shock. One innocent. One broken. One still human. One already transformed by the nightmare. And for a second, it almost feels like Jess is staring directly at her own lost humanity. The newer Jess begs for answers. What's happening? But masked Jess says nothing. Because she already knows the truth wouldn't help. The truth only creates another monster. Then suddenly, Downey appears unexpectedly. He sees both Jess versions. His mind completely breaks. Before anyone can react, he runs in panic, straight into danger. Moments later, he falls to his death. Another unavoidable tragedy. Another death added to the endless cycle. Jess begins realizing something horrifying. The more she interferes, the worse things become. But the nightmare still isn't finished. Greg and Sally eventually corner-massed Jess on the upper deck during a violent storm. Rain crashes around them while lightning flashes across the sky. Sally screams in anger, "Who are you?" Jess almost removes the mask, almost tells them everything, but then she remembers the note. Kill them all and return home. And once again, hope poisons her mind. A brutal struggle begins. The shotgun fires wildly. People scream, and during the chaos, Greg is fatally wounded. Jess tries helping him as he dies in her arms, but he looks at her with fear instead of trust. That moment destroys her emotionally, because now she understands something painful. Even if she escapes, she can never undo what she's become. And then, something impossible happens. The cycle suddenly resets again. The ocean calms. The yacht reappears. Another version of her friends sails toward the ship. Another version of Jess smiles innocently on deck. The nightmare starts over once more. But this time, Jess decides she's done following the rules. And that decision changes everything. Jess stares at the approaching yacht with hollow eyes. By now, she's seen this moment countless times. The same ocean, the same people, the same fake calm before horror begins. But something inside her has finally snapped. She no longer wants to survive the loop. She wants to destroy it. And this is where Triangle becomes emotionally terrifying, because Jess slowly realizes the true enemy may not be the ship. It may be herself. The newest version of the group boards the Aeolus again, confused and frightened exactly like before. Jess secretly watches from above while memories from previous loops flood her mind all at once. Thousands of deaths, thousands of screams, thousands of failures. At this point, time itself feels broken. Past, present, and future all blur together. Jess can barely tell which version of herself she even is anymore. But here's the twist. For the first time, she notices something different. A door, previously locked, now slightly open. And this is where things get interesting. Jess enters the mysterious room carefully and discovers something horrifying inside. A giant wall covered in handwritten messages from previous versions of herself. Save your son. Kill them faster. Don't trust the others. None of this is real. The walls are filled with madness. Proof that countless Jess versions already tried escaping long before her. Some became violent. Some became hopeless. Some completely lost their sanity. And suddenly Jess realizes something devastating. She isn't special. She's just another failed attempt. That realization crushes her emotionally, because the one thing keeping her alive, hope, begins disappearing. Then she notices one final message written larger than all the others. You must return. Return where? Reality? The movie refuses to answer immediately, making the mystery even more disturbing. Meanwhile, the new group begins repeating the familiar chain of events again. Victor gets nervous. Downey panics. Sally argues with Greg. Jess rushes through the corridors, desperately trying to stop things before the violence starts. This time she tries a completely different approach. Instead of hiding, she reveals herself. Jess suddenly appears before the group and begs them to listen. At first, everyone thinks she's insane. Honestly, can you blame them? Imagine seeing another version of your friend covered in blood claiming you're trapped in a time loop. But then Jess starts predicting everything before it happens. She tells Victor where he'll get hurt. She tells Sally what she's about to say next. She even predicts the exact moment the gunshot will echo through the ship. And when it happens exactly as she described, fear spreads across everyone instantly. Now they believe her. But what happens next will shock you. Even with the truth revealed, they still can't escape. Every attempt fails. Every route leads back into the nightmare. One by one, the group starts dying again despite Jess desperately trying to save them. Victor gets trapped. Downey falls during panic. Greg gets separated. It's like the ship itself bends reality to force the cycle forward. Jess finally breaks down, screaming in frustration. No, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. But deep down, she knows it is. Then comes one of the darkest moments in the entire movie explanation in English. Sally survives longer this time and finally confronts Jess alone. Instead of fear, Sally looks at her with sadness. You're the reason this keeps happening, aren't you? That sentence hits harder than any horror scene. Because it's true. Jess wanted escape so badly that she became part of the prison. And suddenly, for the first time, Jess begins wondering something horrifying. What if the loop isn't trying to trap her? What if it's trying to punish her? That idea changes the entire movie. The repetition, the suffering. Maybe none of it is random. Maybe all of it is judgment. And then Jess finally remembers something she had buried deep inside her mind. A memory from before the yacht trip. A terrible memory involving her son. A scream. A car. Blood. Suddenly her entire reality begins collapsing. Because the nightmare may have started long before the storm ever happened, Jess collapses against the wall, breathing heavily as fragmented memories crash into her mind like broken glass. A screaming child. Her own anger. A sudden car crash. And then silence. This changes everything. Until now, the audience believed the nightmare started on the yacht. But here's the twist. The horror may have begun before the ocean trip ever happened. And this is why Triangle Explained videos became legendary online. The movie hides its biggest truth behind fragmented memories and emotional trauma. Jess suddenly remembers how cruel and exhausted she had become while caring for her autistic son. She remembers yelling at him, losing patience, feeling trapped in her own life. The film doesn't show her as evil. It shows her as human, broken, overwhelmed. And that emotional realism makes everything even darker. Meanwhile, the loop continues falling apart around her. The surviving group members run through the ship in terror while another masked Jess stalks them somewhere nearby. Reality itself feels unstable now. Jess finally reaches the upper deck again during another violent storm, and that's when she sees something impossible. The ocean is filled with bodies. Dead versions of Sally floating endlessly in the water. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. All victims of previous loops. The image is horrifying because it confirms the cycle has no mercy. No matter how many times Jess tries, the ending never changes. Then comes one of the most important moments in this full movie breakdown. Jess finally remembers the taxi driver. Earlier in the film, the moment seemed small and forgettable. Now it becomes terrifying, because suddenly she realizes something strange about him. The taxi driver never seemed surprised, never emotional, almost like he already knew what was happening. And this is where things get interesting. Many fans believe the taxi driver represents death itself, or maybe a supernatural ferryman guiding souls between life and death. The movie never confirms it directly, but the clues become impossible to ignore. Especially when Jess finally remembers what truly happened before the yacht trip. The truth is devastating. Jess and her son were in a terrible car accident, and deep down, she knows they probably died. The yacht, the ship, the loops, all of it may exist in some kind of personal hell created from guilt and denial. That realization completely destroys her mentally, because if she's already dead, then escape may be impossible. But what happens next will shock you. Instead of accepting the truth, Jess rejects it completely. Her desperation becomes stronger than reality itself. She becomes obsessed with one impossible goal: returning home and saving her son. That obsession is the engine powering the entire nightmare. The more she refuses reality, the more the loop continues. Then suddenly, the cycle resets again. Jess finds herself back before the yacht trip, standing outside her own house as if nothing happened. At first, it feels like freedom, like she finally escaped. But the atmosphere feels wrong immediately. Everything is too quiet, too perfect. Jess enters the house slowly and sees herself inside. Another version of Jess, alive, arguing angrily with her son exactly like before. This scene is deeply disturbing because Jess is now forced to watch the truth she kept denying. She sees how harsh she had become, how unhappy, how emotionally broken. And then something horrifying happens. Future Jess snaps completely. Overcome with rage and desperation, she attacks her past self violently and kills her. The scene feels shocking because this isn't survival anymore. This is psychological collapse. Jess drags the body away and whispers softly to her son, "It's okay now. Mommy's here." For a brief moment, she believes she fixed everything. She believes she successfully replaced her old self and escaped the nightmare. And honestly, the audience almost wants to believe it too. Because after everything she suffered, we desperately want her to have a second chance. But deep down, the movie has already warned us. The cycle always repeats. And then comes the most tragic moment yet. Jess and her son get into the car together. They start driving away peacefully. Everything seems calm, hopeful, until suddenly, a truck appears. Headlights flash. The screen explodes into chaos. And in that instant, everything resets again. Metal twists. Glass shatters. The car spins violently across the road. And then, silence. Absolute silence. Jess slowly opens her eyes after the crash, disoriented and bleeding. Her body trembles as smoke rises around the wreckage. For a few seconds, everything feels unreal, like a dream. Then she sees her son, motionless. That single image destroys her completely. And this is where Triangle reaches another emotional level entirely. Beneath all the time loops and psychological horror lies a heartbreaking story about guilt, denial, and a mother unable to accept reality. Jess crawls out of the wreckage in shock while rain pours down around her. Suddenly, a taxi pulls up nearby. The driver calmly steps out. No panic, no urgency, just silence. And honestly, that calmness feels terrifying. Because normal people don't react like that to a horrific accident. The taxi driver looks at Jess almost knowingly and asks, "Going somewhere?" That line sounds simple, but after everything we've seen, it becomes deeply unsettling. Jess stares at the wrecked car, unable to process what just happened. Somewhere behind her, sirens echo faintly in the distance. But she refuses to look back, because looking back means accepting the truth, and she still can't do that. Instead, she whispers something heartbreaking. "I have to go back to my son." The taxi driver nods slowly, almost like he's heard those words many times before. And this is where things get interesting. Jess gets into the taxi, unknowingly restarting the entire cycle herself. The driver takes her toward the harbor, the exact same harbor from the beginning of the movie. The same place, the same start, the nightmare preparing to begin again. During the ride, Jess looks out the window in silence while guilt consumes her from the inside. The movie subtly suggests she's trapped not by the ship, but by her inability to let go. Her refusal to accept death. Her refusal to accept her own mistakes. That emotional layer is what makes this movie explanation in English so powerful. Beneath the horror, the story becomes a tragic metaphor for endless regret. Then comes one of the most chilling details in the entire full movie breakdown. Before getting out of the taxi, Jess tells the driver, "I'll be back." And the driver replies softly, "I'll keep the meter running." That line changes everything, because it implies the driver already knows she'll return. And again, and again. The cycle isn't random. It's eternal. Jess walks toward the harbor in a trance-like state, unknowingly stepping directly back into the beginning of the film. And suddenly the audience realizes something horrifying. The opening scene wasn't the start of the story. It was just another repetition. Another loop in an endless cycle. Jess sees Greg preparing the yacht exactly like before. Her friends smile and greet her naturally, completely unaware of the nightmare waiting ahead. But now there's something different in Jess's face. Exhaustion. Recognition. A part of her remembers everything, even if she doesn't fully understand it. Greg asks if she's okay. Jess forces a weak smile. But internally, she's breaking apart. Because deep down, she already knows where this journey ends. Then suddenly, a seagull crashes into the window again. The same bird. The same moment. The exact same trigger restarting the loop. And honestly, that repetition is scarier than any monster in the movie, because it confirms there's no escape. Not through violence. Not through sacrifice. Not through intelligence. Jess is trapped inside a punishment she keeps recreating herself. Then the yacht sails away once more into the endless ocean. The storm slowly approaches again in the distance. And every viewer watching realizes the terrifying truth. Everything we just witnessed is about to happen all over again. The yacht cuts through the ocean once again. Same sky. Same people. Same conversations. Everything repeats so perfectly that it feels almost mechanical, like reality itself is stuck on replay. Jess sits quietly while the others laugh around her, but now we understand what's really happening behind her eyes. Confusion. Fragments of memory clawing their way back to the surface. This is what makes Triangles so brilliant. The movie doesn't just trap the characters inside a loop. It traps the audience too, because now every small detail feels horrifying. The casual jokes, the silence before the storm, the bird hitting the window. We know what's coming, and that dread becomes unbearable. Greg notices Jess staring into the distance and asks if she's feeling okay. She hesitates before quietly saying, "I think something bad is going to happen." The line feels completely different now compared to the beginning of the movie. Before, it sounded like anxiety. Now, it sounds like prophecy. And this is where things get interesting. Jess subconsciously tries changing tiny details. She moves differently, speaks differently, looks around nervously. But no matter what she changes, the storm still comes. Because the loop doesn't care about intentions. It only cares about repetition. Soon, the wind dies again. The ocean becomes unnaturally still. And once more, fear spreads across the group. Victor notices the weather changing. Downey tries making nervous jokes. Sally looks uncomfortable. Everything unfolds exactly like before. Then suddenly, the massive storm hits. Waves crash violently across the yacht while everyone screams in panic. The boat flips over again, throwing everyone into chaos. And honestly, this scene becomes even more disturbing the second time because now we understand the true horror. These people are already doomed. The survivors climb onto the overturned yacht once more while Heather disappears exactly like before. Then through the fog, the Aeolus appears again. Silent, waiting, almost like a predator. At this point, the movie fully reveals its cruel structure. Jess isn't moving toward escape. She's moving deeper into the same nightmare forever. And here's the twist. The ship may not even be the real prison. Her guilt is, every cycle exists because Jess cannot accept responsibility, loss, and death. Instead of facing reality, she keeps trying to fix things. But the more she tries, the more suffering she creates. That tragic idea transforms this from a simple horror movie into something emotionally devastating. Then comes another chilling realization. The name of the ship itself, Aeolus, references the Keeper of Winds in Greek mythology. And many fans connect the story to the myth of Sisyphus, a man cursed to repeat endless labor forever as punishment. That connection changes the entire meaning of the film. Jess is essentially carrying emotional guilt uphill forever, only for everything to reset again. This hidden symbolism is one reason the Triangle review discussions exploded online after release, because every rewatch reveals new layers. Then the group boards the ship once again. The empty corridors, the bloodstains, the footsteps. The repeating nightmare begins exactly as before. But now the audience notices something heartbreaking. Jess already looks defeated. She's trapped between remembering and forgetting. Every loop slowly erases her while keeping the pain alive. And the scariest part? The cycle may never end. Not because it can't end, but because Jess herself won't let it. The movie quietly suggests that acceptance might be the only escape. Accepting death. Accepting guilt. Accepting truth. But Jess can't do that. So the ship keeps waiting for her. And again. And again. Then the film reaches one final haunting moment. As Jess walks deeper into the corridors of the ship, she pauses briefly. Almost like she recognizes the path. Almost like part of her soul remembers every previous loop. She whispers softly, "I've been here before." And with that line, the nightmare fully resets. Jess stands frozen in the hallway. That one sentence she just whispered changes everything. "I've been here before." Not as confusion, not as fear, but as recognition. And this is where Triangle stops being just a time loop thriller and becomes something deeper, something almost philosophical. Because now Jess is no longer just experiencing the loop. She is becoming aware of it. The ship feels different this time. Not because it has changed, but because she has. Every step she takes feels heavier, like she is carrying the weight of every previous version of herself. Every scream, every death, every mistake. They're all still inside her. The corridors of the Aeolus stretch endlessly ahead, but Jess no longer rushes blindly. She listens. She observes. She remembers. And this awareness is dangerous. Because the loop doesn't like being noticed. Suddenly, faint echoes of past events overlap with the present. Jess hears Victor's voice calling from a previous cycle. She sees flashes of Sally running. She sees herself wearing the mask. All timelines bleeding into one moment. This is where things get interesting. The movie subtly reveals that all versions of Jess might exist simultaneously within the ship, layered like overlapping echoes of time. Not past. Not future. Just trapped. Jess reaches the theater again. The same room. The same photographs. But now something is different. The images are not just showing past events. They are reacting to her presence. As she steps closer, some of the photos shift slightly. Faces blur. Positions change. It's like the ship is aware she's looking at it. And it doesn't like being studied. Jess whispers, "What are you?" No answer. Only silence. But then, a new photo appears. Fresh. Still developing. It shows Jess standing in the hallway, moments before she even arrives there. That realization hits her hard. She isn't just inside the loop. She is being written by it. And this is where psychological horror becomes existential horror. Because now Jess understands something terrifying. Maybe she is not trying to escape the loop. Maybe the loop is trying to shape her into something. Meanwhile, deeper inside the ship, another version of Jess begins moving with purpose. Not panicked. Not confused. Calculated. This version is already becoming the killer. And somewhere else, another Jess is still trying to save everyone. All of them existing at once. Different choices. Different outcomes. Same prison. Jess starts walking again, now fully aware that every corridor she enters has already been walked by herself countless times. She passes a mirror. For a moment, she stops. Her reflection doesn't move exactly the same way. Just slightly delayed. Just slightly wrong. Then it smiles a fraction too late. Jess steps back in shock. Because even her reflection is no longer reliable. And this is where things get interesting. She realizes the ship is not just repeating time. It is reconstructing her identity over and over again. Breaking her down. Rebuilding her. Each cycle stripping away a little more of who she was. Until only one version remains. The killer. Jess suddenly understands the horrifying purpose of the loop. It's not just punishment. It's transformation. And then a distant gunshot echoes again. The cycle continues. Somewhere on the ship, someone has already started dying. And Jess begins running, not to escape it, but to reach it. Because now she understands her role in the loop. And what happens next will shock her even more than before. Jess runs through the corridors again, but this time it's different. She isn't confused anymore. She isn't panicking. She's aware. Every step feels like she's moving through a memory she has already lived 1,000 times. The gunshot echoes again in the distance. Not new. Not surprising. Just inevitable. This is the terrifying structure of triangle. A loop where awareness doesn't lead to escape. It leads to understanding, and understanding leads to despair. Jess reaches the hallway where everything always begins to collapse. And she sees it. The group splitting up. Victor injured. Downey panicking. Sally shouting for help. It's all happening again. But now Jess doesn't try to stop it immediately, she watches. Because she finally understands something horrifying. Every attempt to fix the situation is already part of the loop itself. There is no outside path. Only the cycle. Jess slowly walks through the chaos like a ghost observing her own past decisions. Then she sees something that freezes her completely. Another Jess, wearing the mask, standing at the far end of the corridor. But this version is not attacking yet. She's waiting, watching Jess. Almost like she's aware of her too. Two versions of the same person, facing each other across time, and for the first time, Jess realizes something even worse than the loop itself. She is not alone inside her own identity. The ship is splitting her into multiple selves, each one assigned a different role. Victim, observer, killer, and none of them can fully exist without the others. Then suddenly, the masked Jess raises the shotgun slightly, not to shoot, but as a signal, like she's acknowledging the cycle. Jess feels a strange pull in her chest, almost like she is being drawn toward becoming that version. The transformation is already happening. Meanwhile, chaos explodes again as the group scatters. Another death occurs off-screen. The sound of panic fills the ship. But Jess barely reacts anymore. She is detaching. And this emotional detachment is what the loop feeds on. Jess walks toward the masked version of herself slowly, step by step. Not afraid. Not resisting. Just accepting. And that's when things get interesting. The masked Jess suddenly whispers, "You're almost there." Jess stops. Because it's not threatening. It's guiding. Like the loop itself is speaking through her future self. Then the masked version turns and walks away, disappearing into the corridors. Jess follows without hesitation. She is no longer trying to change events. She is trying to understand them. And that understanding leads her to a horrifying truth. Every cycle is training her. Each repetition removes hesitation. Each death removes empathy. Each failure removes doubt, until eventually, there is only one outcome left. Jess reaches a room filled with remnants of past cycles. Blood stains layered on blood stains. Objects repeated endlessly. Even her own footprints overlapping thousands of times. And in the center of the room, a mirror. Jess approaches it slowly. What she sees is not one reflection, but dozens, hundreds, all slightly different versions of herself staring back. Some crying, some screaming, some completely emotionless, and one smiling. That version steps forward inside the reflection, not breaking the mirror, but becoming it. Jess whispers, "What am I becoming?" No answer, only the quiet realization that the loop is not ending. It is refining her. And then, another gunshot echoes. Closer this time. Jess closes her eyes. And for the first time, she doesn't run toward it. She walks. Because now she understands. The next version of herself is already waiting. Jess walks through the corridor in complete silence. No running. No panic. Just steady footsteps echoing through the empty ship. Something inside her has changed completely. Not healed, not fixed, but transformed. This is the final psychological stage of Triangle, where fear no longer controls Jess, because she has seen it too many times to feel it properly anymore. The gunshot echoes again, closer, and this time, Jess doesn't even flinch. She enters the next hallway and sees the aftermath immediately. Another body, another death, another repeat of something she has already witnessed countless times. But now she looks at it differently, not as tragedy, not as shock, but as pattern. And that's the most disturbing shift in the entire movie explanation in English. Jess is no longer reacting like a victim. She is thinking like the system that created the loop. Then she sees her friends again. The newest version of them. Still alive. Still unaware. Still walking into their fate exactly like before. Greg laughs nervously. Victor complains. Sally tries to stay calm. Downey looks confused. Jess watches them carefully, almost emotionally distant now. Because she knows exactly how this ends. But here's the twist. She no longer tries to stop it. Instead, she starts observing them like variables in an experiment. This is where things get interesting. Jess begins noticing that every version of her reacts slightly differently depending on what she chooses. If she warns them too early, the loop adjusts. If she stays silent, the loop continues. If she intervenes violently, the loop resets faster. Everything she does is accounted for. Everything she does is predicted. The ship is not just repeating time. It is correcting it. Jess finally reaches the upper deck again during the storm. Rain pours down violently. Lightning splits the sky. And below, the endless ocean stretches like a void with no escape. Then she sees something horrifying again. The yacht. Approaching. Perfectly timed. Perfectly repeated. And for a moment, Jess understands the truth at a deeper level than ever before. The loop is not a place. It is a state of punishment. A system that forces her to relive the consequences of something she cannot accept. Then suddenly, a memory hits her with full force. The car crash. Her son. The silence afterward. This time, she doesn't resist the memory. She lets it fully enter her mind. And what she realizes changes everything. She didn't just lose her son. She failed him in a moment she cannot undo. And that guilt is what powers the entire cycle. Not magic. Not monsters. Not ghosts. Her mind. The ship, the storm, the loop. All of it is shaped by her inability to accept reality. Jess falls to her knees in the rain. Finally understanding. Finally seeing the truth clearly. But even now, she still cannot let go. because accepting it means living with unbearable pain forever. And so the cycle continues. But something is different this time. Jess stands up again, slowly, calmly, and walks toward the edge of the deck. The wind howls around her. The storm grows stronger. And as she looks into the ocean, she whispers, "I'll fix it this time." But deep down, even she knows that line is no longer hope. It is repetition. And then, the loop resets again. But this time, something feels slightly different. Almost like the ship is waiting for her to try again. The ocean is calm again. Too calm. The storm is gone, the chaos is gone, and everything feels reset like nothing ever happened. But Jess is not the same anymore. She stands at the harbor, staring at the yacht in silence as if she has lived this moment beyond counting. Because she has. And this is the final layer of Triangle, where the horror is no longer the ship, but the endless return to the beginning. Greg waves at her. The group laughs. The same invitation is given again. "Come on, Jess. Let's go sailing." And for a second, it feels normal. Almost comforting. But Jess doesn't move. Her face is empty, like she's carrying the weight of every version of herself that has ever stepped onto that boat. Every scream, every death, every failed attempt to change fate. All of it is inside her now. The seagull flies overhead. It dives and crashes into the glass window. That sound hits differently now, because Jess knows what it means. Not an accident, not coincidence, a trigger, a reset, a beginning disguised as randomness. The yacht prepares to leave again. Greg calls out once more, and this time Jess finally walks forward. But slowly, not with hope, not with fear, with acceptance of something far worse. She steps onto the yacht knowing exactly what will happen next. The group continues talking like before. The ocean stretches ahead like an open promise. But Jess stands at the edge of it all, quietly watching. And the final thought inside her mind is devastating. There is no escape, only return. This is the true meaning behind the full movie breakdown of Triangle. A loop not built from magic or monsters, but from guilt that refuses to die. A punishment created by the mind itself. A cycle where every attempt to fix the past only recreates it. And Jess? She is both the prisoner and the architect of the prison. The yacht sails away. The storm begins forming in the distance again. And the screen fades, not to an ending, but to a beginning. Because the story was never moving forward. It was always repeating. Final verdict. This movie isn't just a thriller. It's a psychological trap. A story about guilt, denial, and the endless loops we create inside our own minds when we refuse to accept painful truths. That's what makes Triangle 2009 Explained so powerful even today. Because the real horror isn't the ship. It's being stuck in your own regret forever. And now the question is for you. If you were Jess, would you break the loop? Or become part of it? If you look at Triangle beyond the surface story, the ending isn't really about a ship or a time loop at all. It's about something much darker. Jess is trapped in a self-made punishment loop. Every cycle begins the same way because her mind refuses to accept one truth: the car crash involving her son. So instead of processing grief, her psyche builds a repeating, alternate reality where she keeps trying to undo what happened. That's why the yacht always resets, the storm always returns, the deaths always repeat, and Jess always ends up becoming the killer version of herself. It's not random. It's psychological erosion. Each loop removes a part of her humanity. First loop, confusion; middle loops, desperation; later loops, control and violence; final loops, emotional numbness. By the end, she doesn't feel like a victim anymore. She feels like the system running the loop itself. And that's the real horror. Not death. Not survival. but being forced to relive your worst moment forever, slightly different each time, hoping for a different outcome that can never exist. Final interpretation. The triangle isn't just the ship. It represents the cycle of guilt, the loop of denial, realization, resistance, reset, and the impossibility of escaping your own mind when you refuse acceptance. That's why the taxi driver scene feels so important. It hints that Jess may already be dead, and everything is happening in a mental or liminal punishment state. Final verdict. As a psychological thriller, Triangle is not about solving the loop. It's about understanding why the loop exists. And the answer is simple but brutal. She keeps coming back because she cannot forgive herself. Even after the final ending, Triangle doesn't truly feel finished. Because the real question still remains. If everything is a loop, then where does it actually begin? Jess is back on the yacht again. Same faces. Same ocean. Same uneasy feeling building inside her chest. But this time, something is different in her awareness. She is no longer just experiencing events. She is watching herself experience them. That small shift changes everything. The storm hasn't even started yet, but Jess already feels its arrival like déjà vu carved into her memory. Greg laughs nearby. Victor adjusts the sails. Sally smiles casually, but Jess doesn't respond, because she recognizes every second before it happens. And this is where the psychological horror deepens again. The loop isn't just repeating events. It's compressing memory across all versions of Jess into a single awareness. She remembers deaths that haven't happened yet. She feels guilt for actions she hasn't committed yet. And she understands fear before danger arrives. Then suddenly, the seagull hits the window. The group reacts. Nothing changes. But Jess closes her eyes for a moment and whispers something barely audible. "I remember all of it now." That single line breaks the illusion of time completely. Because she is no longer inside the loop. She is aware of every loop at once. And somewhere deep inside the ship of reality itself, the cycle continues anyway. Not because it must, but because she cannot stop remembering. And that is the true curse. The storm begins again. But this time, it feels heavier. Almost like the ocean itself is tired of repeating the same violence. Jess stands at the edge of the overturned yacht later, staring into the fog where the massive ship will appear once more. But instead of fear, she feels something else. Understanding. And that is more dangerous than panic. Because panic makes you react. Understanding makes you accept. As the Aeolus slowly emerges again through the mist, Jess finally notices something she never saw before. The ship is not approaching her. She is being pulled toward it. Every loop, every decision, every death was not random movement. It was alignment. A system slowly guiding her back to the same structure again and again. And then the final realization hits. There is no escape route, because escape implies distance. But the loop is not distance-based. It is identity-based. As long as Jess exists as someone who refuses to accept what happened to her son, the loop will always form around her. The ship doesn't trap her. Her mind does. Jess steps forward toward the approaching vessel without resistance now. Not because she has given up, but because she finally understands the shape of her prison. And for the first time, she doesn't fight the cycle. She becomes aware that she is the cycle. The camera pulls back. The storm grows louder. The ship approaches. And somewhere in the endless repetition of time, Jess begins again, not as punishment, but as memory that refuses to die. The ocean stretches endlessly in every direction. No land, no escape, no beginning that feels real anymore. Jess stands alone on the deck as the cycle quietly resets once again inside Triangle. But this time, there is no shock, no confusion, No panic. Only recognition. Everything feels like a memory she has already lived more times than she can count. Greg is laughing again. Victor is joking again. Sally is adjusting her hair again. Even the wind feels familiar. And Jess understands something deeper now. The loop doesn't restart around her. It restarts through her. Every version of her that enters this cycle is not a new person. It is the same consciousness, slightly fractured each time, trying again with less hope and more desperation. The yacht moves forward. The horizon stays empty. And Jess slowly walks to the edge of the deck, staring into the water below. Not searching for escape anymore, but searching for meaning. Then she whispers something different this time. I know what I am now. Not a victim, not a killer, not even a prisoner, but the source of repetition itself. And suddenly, the ocean feels like a mirror, not reflecting her face, but every version of her that has ever existed in the loop. All standing at once. All remembering different endings. All trapped in the same beginning. The seagull flies overhead again. But Jess doesn't react. She just watches it. And for a brief moment, she almost smiles. Because she finally understands the cruel structure of everything. The loop was never trying to break her. It was trying to make her aware. And awareness is the only thing that never escapes. The yacht continues sailing forward into the unknown storm forming far away. And Jess stands there calmly now, accepting the repetition, not because she is free, but because she finally understands there was never anything outside the loop to begin with. Only her. And again, and again.